Hey everyone, so here's what's been happening in crypto today. And trust me, it's actually pretty interesting stuff. Alright, so if you've been watching the markets today, you probably noticed crypto was having a pretty decent morning. We saw some nice green candles across the board. The things have cooled off just a bit since then. But hey, when I'm looking at live CoinWatch right now, it's still mostly a beautiful sea of green, instead of that scary red we sometimes see. We've got some coins pumping a few percentage points, others absolutely crushing it with gains closer to 8 or 9%. Not too shabby. Now Bitcoin? Well, it's being Bitcoin, pretty much flat right now at just under $110,000, though it was flexing a bit higher earlier today. But here's the thing, something really important happened today that I want to break down for you. We got some major news that dropped, and this is exactly the kind of stuff that typically gets these crypto rallies fired up. Now, before we dive into that juicy news, I've been seeing a ton of XRP chart analysts throwing around this scary word, capitulation. Sounds terrifying, right? Basically, they're saying XRP might need to drop way lower before it can moon again. But are we actually doomed here? Well, let's talk about that too, because I've got some thoughts. Right now, XRP is sitting at $2.78, and Bitcoin's chilling just below that psychological $110,000 level. And wow, has it been a roller coaster. XRP hit a low of $2.70 this morning, then shot up to $2.81. Not exactly a massive breakout, but hey, movement is movement, especially when there's news driving it. So here's the big story that hit the wires today. Check out this headline from CNBC. Core inflation rate held at 2.9% in August. As expected, Fed's gauge shows. Okay, so what does this actually mean for us crypto folks?
Well, today we got the Fed's absolute favorite inflation number, the PCE index. And guess what? It came in at 2.7% year over year. The core PCE, which strips out all that volatile food and energy stuff, hit 2.9%. Now here's the interesting part. Both of these numbers were exactly what everyone expected, so technically no big surprises there. But remember, we just had some pretty brutal red candles yesterday, so I think the market was genuinely relieved just to see expectations being met. But wait, there's a catch. These numbers? They're actually the highest we've seen since February. So here's what that means. Inflation isn't just steadily dropping anymore like we all hoped. It's actually starting to tick back up again. This usually would be bad news now. Under normal circumstances, this would probably force the Fed to hit the brakes, maybe pause rate cuts or even think about raising rates again. And remember, we literally just got our first rate cut in forever this month. A nice little 25 basis point cut that had everyone pretty excited. So you'd think, oh no, this inflation data means the Fed's going to pivot and ruin the party, right? But here's the plot twist. But here's where it gets really interesting. Despite this inflation uptick, the Fed is absolutely still planning to keep cutting rates. And if you're holding crypto or stocks, this is exactly what you want to hear. Let me explain why this makes sense. Yeah, just the other day, and I literally talked about this in yesterday's video. The GDP numbers for Q2 got revised higher, showing our economy actually grew faster than we initially thought. On the surface, that sounds pretty bullish, right? Strong economy, good times. But when you dig deeper into the data, there are definitely some warning signs starting to pop up.
The underlying weakness. Job growth has been cooling off, credit conditions are getting tighter, and a bunch of those leading economic indicators are still pointing towards slower growth ahead. The Fed knows that if they keep rates too high for too long, they risk completely tipping the economy over, especially when there's so much debt floating around in the system. The key factor. And here's the crucial part. Long-term inflation expectations are still anchored right around that 2% target. At least that's what the Fed keeps telling us. This means they feel like they can keep easing without losing their credibility. What this means for crypto. So what does all this Fed talk mean for your portfolio? Well, it means real rates are falling, liquidity is increasing, and guess what loves that combination? Risk assets, including our beloved crypto. Today's market reaction. In fact, I'm pretty sure we saw this play out in real time today. Crypto prices got a nice little bounce after that PCE report dropped because traders basically looked at the data and said, you know what? This isn't too hot, isn't too cold. It's just right, especially coming off those red candles we saw yesterday. Why this is actually great news. So like I mentioned earlier, this should actually be pretty welcome news for us. Yeah, inflation is ticking up, but it's exactly in line with what everyone expected, and that keeps the Fed right on track for more rate cuts. The prediction markets are backing this up too. They're still betting on cuts ahead. Even though today's price moves weren't massive, the narrative is crystal clear, and it's supporting at least a short-term boost in market sentiment. And for crypto, including our beloved XRP, this is exactly why all of this matters so much. The perfect storm setup. Here's the thing. Inflation hanging above the Fed's target, combined with easier money policies, this creates the exact same kind of setup we saw back in 2020 and 2021 during the last market cycle, when crypto absolutely exploded higher. And you know what I always say, history doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes, so you should absolutely expect similar patterns to play out. The Russell 2000 connection. Now, I've been talking about this a ton lately because it's so important. You never, and I mean never, see alt season kickoff without the Russell 2000 breaking out first. For those who don't know, that's small cap stocks. And here's why it matters. When the Russell 2000 starts ripping, that's the market opening up its appetite for risk. It shows investors are getting bolder and moving beyond just the safe, big name plays. And guess what happens when the Russell 2000 goes on a tear? That's exactly when alts start going crazy too, which would be absolutely fantastic for XRP. Russell 2000 just hit new highs. Here's what's really exciting. We actually hit a new all-time high last week for the first time in nearly 4 years. Then we got an intraday all-time high just a few days ago. The all-time closing high last week was the first one we'd seen since way back in 2021. Sure, the Russell pulled back the other day, but today, it's up almost 1%. And honestly, I have a really hard time believing it fought its way back to these levels, poked above them, just to say, okay, I'm done for now. That just doesn't make sense to me. Where all that money has to go, especially when you look at what global M2 money supply is doing right now, all that liquidity has got to go somewhere. And when there's more money sloshing around the system, people naturally develop a bigger appetite for risk assets. It's just human nature. Don't let short-term fear cloud the big picture. Look, I know people are scared in the short term. I get it. But here's what I really believe. If you just let enough time pass, people aren't going to be scared anymore. In fact, I think they're going to be in complete blissful euphoria if you just give it time. I still think that's exactly what's coming. What the smart money is saying. Here's a great post from Matsby that really captures what I'm seeing. He's looking at the crypto total market cap and says, total is still just range bound and building a base at the highest levels ever. Yet people think we are losing all kinds of support and saying it's game over. And folks, that's exactly what I keep seeing everywhere. If you're on social media, and I know you probably are, you've probably had the same experience. There's just tons of doom and gloom out there right now. The reality check. And this is all happening while we're sitting at what I admit is a pretty key technical level. I've been talking about that too, and look, sometimes the improbable does happen. Could things crater from here? Sure, it's possible, but that's not what's probable. I think we're about to absolutely blaze to the upside, and then XRP, for the first time in the better part of a decade, is finally going to go on one of those face-melting rallies we've all been waiting for. The final phase is coming. We're still waiting for that final price discovery phase, that face-melting part of the cycle. And I still think that's exactly what comes next. Human nature never changes. Here's the thing that just makes complete sense to me. It doesn't make sense that humans are suddenly not going to behave like humans have always behaved throughout history. You know how it goes. You take profits from Bitcoin, but then you stay greedy and start looking around for other coins that haven't pumped yet. You really think that basic human behavior just doesn't apply anymore? Even though global M2 is increasing and we're sitting at all-time highs right now? Come on. The big picture reality check. Look, I just don't see how anyone can think the current levels are probably going to be the peak. Now, I'm not saying we can't go lower in the short term. That's totally possible. But here's what I want you to think about. Fast forward like a year from now. When we look back at these 12 months, do you really think we're going to say, well, that was actually the peak back in September 2025? I seriously doubt it. I really, really doubt it. I think we're going way, way, way higher than where we are right now. But again, and this is important, that doesn't mean we can't dip lower first. The viral capitulation chart. So last night, the blockchain backer shared this post that has been absolutely everywhere. We're talking 271,000 views and counting, and for good reason. He wrote, XRP has created a structure that commonly leads to a capitulation. Now, he's not trying to scare anyone here. This is just what he's seeing in the charts. And I've gotten perspective from a bunch of different analysts that I'm going to share with you in this video. This doesn't mean it's the end of the world, and I haven't seen the blockchain backer say this is necessarily game over either. Breaking down the chart pattern. So let me show you what he's talking about. On the left, he's showing XRP right now in 2025. That's where we are currently. Then on the right, he's showing what it looked like during the last market cycle in 2021 to 2022. And structurally, It's basically the same thing that created that capitulation back then. He also shows Bitcoin with the same structure from the 2018 capitulation. Pretty interesting stuff, right? What the smart analysts are saying. So should we expect XRP to go a bit lower? Well, as it turns out, there are actually a lot of analysts that I follow who think that's absolutely plausible. But here's the key thing, and most of the analysts I follow would agree with this. This isn't something to scare you. It doesn't mean the party's over. This would likely happen in conjunction with a broader crypto pullback. And honestly, that stuff happens all the time in this space. Credible Crypto Ways. And chart analyst Credible Crypto also gave his take on this, and I think he and the blockchain backer are honestly a couple of the best analysts in the entire crypto space. Credible Crypto has a well-deserved 477,000 followers, so people definitely listen when he talks. He's basically showing the exact same thing, the same time period, the same pattern. This is today, this is 2025 on your screen with the XRP/USD chart. The important context everyone's missing. Here's what Credible Crypto wrote, and this is really important. Getting a lot of people asking me about a capitulation scenario on XRP, and I've already replied to like 5 different comments about it. So posting this so I don't need to keep replying to everyone individually. The chart that seems to have people in a panic is this one here, and that's what you're seeing on screen. But then he says something crucial, and this is exactly why it's important to zoom out and consider context at all times. The zoomed out view changes everything. When we zoom out, that scary structure is just this tiny orange circle on the higher time frame chart. So what I showed you first, that's the zoomed in view going back just the last few months. But when you zoom out to the bigger picture, that whole pattern is just this little blip in the orange circle. Why perspective matters. And that's exactly why context is so important in chart analysis. What looks terrifying on the short-term chart might just be a small consolidation on the bigger time frame, what the dip could actually look like. So here's what Credible Crypto says next, and this is really important. As I stated in the tweets below, if Bitcoin were to see sub $105,000, that probably means XRP breaks this floor for a dip lower. However, this doesn't change the higher time frame setup, which remains extremely bullish. He continues, I wouldn't call this capitulation per se, but it would be a dip along with everything else, likely below the triple lows at $2.65-ish, and into higher time frame demand at $2 to $2.40. Why I'm not scared, and you shouldn't be either. Now, if XRP actually goes that low, I know it's going to absolutely terrify a lot of people, but here's the thing, it will not scare me at all. And here's why. As I've said many times before, even if we were actually going into a bear market and the highs were already in for this cycle, which I absolutely do not believe, I'm just going to keep holding. In fact, I'll probably accumulate even more over the next few years because I'm going to keep earning new money. Then I'll just have even more tokens the next time we get a market pump. Control what you can control. So either way, I'm still going to win. It's all about controlling the parts you can control and letting go of the rest. You don't control when the market pumps, but you either have exposure to what happens or you don't. That's the part you can control. And since you never know exactly when that pump is going to happen, that's why to me the HODL life is just the way to go. It's just a normal crypto dip. Credible Crypto puts this in perspective perfectly. He says that's around a 10 to 15% drop to the downside for XRP, which is what we'd see for most coins in the space, not just XRP. And he believes XRP would likely be one of the first and strongest to bounce back and recover into new all-time highs when the market rebounds. So even if we drop to those levels, XRP is still completely fine, according to his analysis. It doesn't signal the end of the market cycle at all. Other analysts agree. Here's a post from chart analyst Bob Lucas. He's also recognizing that, yeah, XRP could go lower, but it's not going to scare him either. He says a golden pocket retest for XRP from its latest low to swing high would be between $2.50 to $2.55, and it wouldn't change a single thing about where the asset is heading. Then he adds something really interesting. Maybe just one thing. More than likely, it would weed out all the weak hands who don't deserve to benefit from what is to come for those who can see what is coming. Strategy plus patience. The consistent message. This wouldn't change his perspective either, and this is exactly what I keep seeing. I'm just giving you a few examples in this video, but out of all the analysts, all of them who acknowledge that, yeah, what the blockchain backer is warning about could actually happen, they're still insisting that the market's going to rebound and we're ultimately going higher. Why alt season is still coming. And honestly, it would be really weird to have a bull run, which I believe we're in, and without an alt season. That just doesn't make logical sense to me at all. Some pushback on the capitulation term. Here's Chart Nerd, who was also commenting on the blockchain backer's post about capitulation. He said, capitulation is strong terminology. Coming back to the $2.60 to $2.40 level noted, however, would reset the launch pad completely. So there are some people offering critiques, saying that capitulation might be too strong of a word for what we're potentially looking at. My take on the capitulation debate. Look, it's more like we're just moving down, and whether you think that's capitulation or not is pretty subjective. I personally don't have a problem with that word being used here. I mean, that would be a fairly big drop, so in my opinion, I think the term fits. Some analysts have their own perspective and think that's too strong of a word, but let's be real, it is a significant drop. And definitionally, that's what it would be. I think it would absolutely shake out the weak hands and then, like Chart Nerd said, reset the launchpad completely. Chart Nerd's massive price targets. And speaking of Chart Nerd, he's still calling for some absolutely huge price targets. In a separate post this morning, he's calling for $8 XRP, another key level at $15, and then he thinks XRP is going to peak this cycle at $27. So whatever happens with this potential dip, it's definitely not changing his long-term perspective. Eggreg Crypto says buy the dip. Here's a post from chart analyst Eggreg Crypto from this morning. He's looking at the XRP/USD chart and says, the bullish engulfing candle. People are crying while they should be scooping it up. He's got a little shopping cart emoji there. I think he just means buying the dip. He continues, if I see anyone asking for a dip again, I might block them. You wanted prices below $3? Well, here it is. Then he gets into the technical stuff. The next time we see a bullish engulfing candle on the weekly chart, XRP could shoot up to new all-time highs, possibly reaching around $7.30. But if Bitcoin drops more, watch for the important level at $2.60, and maybe even down to $2.37. The key buying opportunity. Here's the important part. If we hit $2.37 before the next rise, it's your chance to buy cheap. XRP is holding above the bull market support band, so we are in a strong position. As long as we don't see any full body candles closing below the lower end of the bull market support band, we're in good shape. No panic from the smart money. And again, these are just a few examples of what I'm seeing out there. I'm not seeing panic from the analysts who really know what they're talking about. I'm not seeing these XRP chart analysts who have great accuracy over long periods of time flipping bearish on the higher timeframes. None of them are suddenly big picture bearish on XRP. None of them. The perfect macro setup. And like I've said in so many videos recently, especially over the past few weeks, macro conditions are so perfectly primed in a way that we haven't seen in several years. And it's happening at exactly the time when you'd logically expect it, because history tends to rhyme with itself. That's going to be absolutely fantastic for XRP. XRP will be one of the greatest beneficiaries of this environment when things really start going parabolic. Dark Defender's analysis. Here's a great post from chart analyst Dark Defender that really puts things in perspective. He says, XRP has completed the ABCDE wave correction on the daily time frame. Just a bit of patience was needed. Then he makes this crucial point. Although we use historical patterns to predict upcoming moves, and although the patterns appear similar, we need to remind ourselves that the use case of XRP is incomparable to 2017 and 2021. Why this time is different. He continues, yes, some indicators are bearish, and I admit it, but we are not in 2017. We are expecting ABCDE consolidation instead of harsh consolidation. Can this harsh consolidation still be the case? Yes, but I believe the demand for XRP is increasing like mad day by day. The consolidation range. So this consolidation can fade out, staying between $3.33 to $2.64. I have been sharing the possible support levels here and on Darkside in much detail, and then he drops this bomb. Ultimately, as long as support levels are maintained, there is no limitation for XRP reaching double digits. My personal investment philosophy. Now, not financial advice here, just my personal thoughts. I don't think those price targets are crazy at all, but here's the thing. I don't make price predictions myself. I'm not a chart guy. That stuff would honestly bore me to tears. I don't want to do that, and it also wouldn't change what I do with my investments anyway. Why I just hodl? I'm just very strict with myself when it comes to my strategy. It's nothing but hodling for me. I don't get in and out of positions. I don't sell a coin thinking something else is going to go higher and then go chase that other opportunity. If I want a different coin, I'll just use new money to go buy that coin. But once I invest in something, I just stay invested. I'm very strict with myself on that approach. Why this strategy works. And you know what? It's worked out incredibly well for me. My crypto portfolio is worth a fortune compared to what I originally put in, and I'm very happy with that result. I've been in this space since 2017, and I've learned that time in the market is way, way more important than timing the market. The trading trap. Timing the market? Not so much success there. If you're playing macro swings over long periods, that's one thing. But I'm talking about the short-term stuff, the trader-style mentality where people are constantly jumping in and out. People lose money doing that stuff all the time. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Double-digit possibilities. As for double-digit price action, I don't know if it'll happen, but I definitely don't think it's crazy. I don't think $10 is crazy, or $15, or $20, or $25, maybe even $30.
The higher you go in those predictions, the less confident I am that we'll actually hit those levels. But tons of analysts I follow have predictions somewhere in that range, so maybe the truth ends up being somewhere in between all of them. Life-changing potential. But here's what I know. I think any price in that range would be more than sufficient for tons of you listening right now. If XRP gets anywhere in that range, I genuinely think that's going to be life-changing for so many of you. The big picture reminder. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, what's happening right now on a macro scale, this is exactly the kind of environment that fuels these massive rallies. It is coming. And I am not the least bit afraid of a little pullback before that happens. Everything's going to be all right, folks. Final thoughts. So whether we see some short-term choppiness or not, whether we get that potential dip to the $2.40 range or not, the bigger picture remains incredibly exciting. The fundamentals are strong, the macro environment is perfect, and the potential upside is absolutely massive. Just remember to stay disciplined with your strategy. Don't let short-term price action shake you out of long-term wealth creation. And always remember, this is not financial advice, just one person's perspective on what looks like an incredible opportunity unfolding. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to stay updated on all the latest developments.